Today we're going to talk about my one lens Nikon setup for my next trip to the Southwestern US. So I have an upcoming trip to the Southwestern US that's going to be more family driven than photography driven. And what I mean by that is we're going out. I used to live in Tucson, Arizona, and we got some family out there that we need to go check in on. So we're going to go out, check in on family, might see a friend or two. And while I'll be able to squeeze in some photography, it is certainly not the primary purpose of the trip. So as I approach this trip, I still want to take my good camera and a lens, but I want to keep that load fairly small. And so I want to pare down from my normal full carry that I would take on a photography-oriented trip. Now in the past, I've talked about how I would use the Micro Four Thirds system on that, whether it be a Panasonic GX85 or a Panasonic G9. And I've done videos on that, which I'll link down below. And while I love the Micro Four Thirds camera system, I spend so much time with the Nikon cameras that I just feel like I know them like the back of my hand. And it really lets that tool sort of get out of the way and help me really work on my creativity and be creative and use the tool as a means to that, as opposed to getting stuck with menus or remembering where certain buttons are and things like that. So for this particular trip, I'm doing a one lens Nikon setup in order to keep my load light, and I think it'll be a pretty versatile way to go. My normal carry when photography is the primary purpose is I usually have 2 camera bodies, 3 lenses ranging from a 14 to 30, a 24 to 120, and a 100 to 400, plus all my audio video gear to make content like this. But for this trip, I'm going down to just 1 camera body and 1 lens, and I thought it'd be worthwhile doing a video on what I'm taking so people can see if maybe you're in a similar situation, you're traveling with family, you want to have a nice camera with you, but you're a little worried about what should I leave home, what should I take with me? Or this can also be a good video if you're just getting started in landscape photography and trying to find a setup that lets you do a lot with just a little bit of equipment. And we'll talk about how you can make it even a little more budget friendly compared to what I'm actually taking on this particular trip. So with that, let's dive in. So let's take a look at the stills photography equipment first. Like I said, I'm keeping it really minimal with what I'm taking. And we're going to take 1 camera body, and it's going to be this Nikon Z7 II, which is my favorite landscape photography camera. I do carry a Z6 II as a backup, but it's not going on this trip. I'm just going to have faith that my Z7 II will work out. It's been a pretty reliable camera, so I'm not expecting a whole lot of trouble with that. One of the reasons I like this particular camera, it's a higher resolution camera at around 45 megapixels, which is going to sort of play into my lens choice a little bit. But like I said, nice solid camera, dual card slots. I've done videos on the Nikon Z7 II and why I like it for landscape photography. I'll link to those down in the description. So the harder choice is the lens. Which lens am I going with? Luckily, I have several lenses at my disposal. Like I said, a normal carry for me would be the Nikon 14 to 30, the Nikon 24 to 120, and the Nikon 100 to 400. Now, those are all great lenses, but when I'm only going to take 1 lens, I am actually going to choose the Nikon 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3. It's a variable aperture lens, but it gives me everything from a 24mm on the wide side all the way out to a 200mm on the telephoto side. And then when you pair that with the Nikon Z7 II, it gives me a little bit of cropping room. So I figure I can probably push this out to about 300mm with this particular setup. Now, you may be asking, I own a 24-120, why am I not taking it? And this is a great lens, and it really helps me cover that middle range of my normal photography outing. But out in Arizona, the landscapes are more expansive, and I might want to isolate some sort of ridge or some sort of peak or some sort of cactus off in the distance. And so I really sort of favor that extra reach. I favor being able to get all the way up to 200mm as opposed to 120. So while I've used this as a 1 lens carry before, on this particular trip, I'm going with the 24 to 200. Now the 24 to 200, I've done videos on this particular lens as well. Again, links to those down below. And one of its little complaints is it's not a super expensive lens. It's a very budget-friendly lens. And sometimes people say it's just a little soft in certain areas. Well, over the course of doing videos about this lens, I've had people recommend DxO Pure Raw software to me, and I've started using that on occasion, and I'm planning on using it to just sort of clean up the files taken with the 24 to 200, just clean them up a little bit. So I really think that'll be a good choice. 24mm is pretty good. As far as a wide angle side, I can always get into panoramas if I want something a little wider. And then, like I said, being able to get out to 200 natively with just the glass is great. And then with the cropping factor I have by using a higher megapixel camera, I feel confident I can sort of push this to like a 300mm focal length equivalent or something like that by doing a pretty severe crop on the image. So that's what I'm going with on that particular front. Now, I talked about how this could also be useful for someone trying to getting started with landscape photography on a budget. Now, obviously, in that case, you're probably not going to want to run out and go buy a Nikon Z7 II if you're still trying to figure out if you're interested in landscape photography or if you just don't have the budget for, you know, a full frame, higher megapixel camera. But then you could look at a Z6 II to bring that budget down. You could look at a Nikon Z5 to bring that budget down, or you could even start to get into a crop sensor camera to bring that budget down even more into something like a Z50. So there's a couple options for you, but it really, if you pair one camera body with this 24-200 lens, you really won't have much of an excuse not to get out there and have some great images for your landscape photography. So keep that in mind if you're trying to keep that budget down. Next up, of course, we'll take some filters. We'll be taking the Maven filters out there. I've got the step-up ring on here already. I shoot with 82mm filters, so this is a 67mm to 82mm filter, magnetic lens cap. Done all sorts of videos on Maven filters and magnetic filters in general. Got the Maven filters here. What we'll be doing is I am going to take the linear polarizing filter, one of the new filters from Maven, their Wave 2 Kickstarter that they just wrapped up about a month or two ago. And I'll be taking normal ND filters, a 3-stop, 6-stop, and 10-stop. And finally, I am taking a 20-stop ND filter just in case I get lucky and there's some clouds in the sky or something like that. I might play with a nice, soft, long exposure on the clouds. So I am taking my filters. And then finally, tripod. While I do handhold things when I'm trying to move quickly and things like that, I do like to have a tripod with me. So we'll be taking my FLM CP30S4. This is my travel tripod. It gets up to a decent height. It doesn't weigh too much. It fits in nicely against my bag when I'm flying with it. And then we'll be using the Integral N44 ball head here. I usually pop this off and put it in the bag when I'm flying with it. But like I said, I've done a full video on flying with camera gear that covers sort of how I pack all of this and tips and tricks for that. Link to that down below. So if you're flying with camera gear, be sure to check that video out. So accessory wise, let's just grab the bags. I use tech pouches for my accessories. Just makes it a little easier to find things like that. And if I'm need to shuffle something around real quick, I know which bag to grab usually. So accessories, let's take a look. Start with this bag here. This is usually my batteries, spare batteries for the camera. I'm only taking one extra battery. I don't need to be quite as concerned with power because, again, not super long out in the field. And two, I'll always be near power to recharge, so not a big deal. Remote trigger that I picked up that I've been playing with. Just a little leash for my camera in case say we go to the zoo and I want to take my camera with me. It makes it easier to carry with this. Some lens cleaning wipes just in case I need them. And then just a couple miscellaneous cables and a spare plate as well. So that's the first round of accessories. Let's put these back in here. Set this over here. Next up, we've got cleaning supplies. So dusty desert, you always want to be able to clean things. So got a little rocket blower here, more lens wipes, this little pouch full of tools, just those things that are handy, the Allen keys for tripod plates and tripod legs, things like that. That's what I keep in here. And then finally, a little static brush. The Nikon mirrorless I've complained about in the past, the sensors do get dirty. There's no sensor shield over it. So I like this as sort of a way to clean it if the rocket blower is not taking care of things. This has usually worked out pretty well and keeps me from having to do a wet cleaning of the sensor most often. So that's what goes in here. Just tuck those away. And we got this big bag. This one usually goes into my carry-on, but in this particular trip, there'll be room in the camera bag for it, I'm sure. This is a Shimoda drop pocket, and it's a third pocket for my camera bag. I tend to put my tripod head in here when I travel, specifically when I'm flying. It just gives a little bit of protection, keep it from banging around against things. And then once I arrive to where I'm going, it gives me the option to carry an additional water bottle or something like that. So that'll go with me. And here, this is chargers, battery chargers, wall plugs, USB-C hubs so I can make backups when I'm flying with the iPad. On this particular trip, I'm probably going with the laptop as opposed to the iPad. I can be out there a little longer, and I think I'll have more computer time than I normally do. So I'll probably take the normal computer, but take that. Brackets for my phone in case I decide to do any video with my phone. What else? That's pretty much it. It's chargers and card readers. Let's see. CF Express card readers, everything I need to make backups of photos on the road. My backup SSD drive will go in here. And like I said, this is the bigger bag. This particular trip, it'll fit in my camera bag for the travel, but I sometimes put it in my little backpack that I use for carry-on as well. And those are the accessories. That's really what I'm going to be taking. This is a pretty minimal load to compare to what I normally take. Like I said, one camera body, one lens. I feel pretty good about the choice for camera body and lens. I think that'll work out just fine. Taking a little bit of video gear, just in case I find the time to do sunrise video or something like that. I like to make sure I have it. And then, of course, the accessories to make everything go. The power, the backups, charging, everything like that, that goes as well. Okay, and all of this stuff is going in my Shimoto Design Explorer 35 liter version 2. This should be no surprise to anyone who's been watching my channel for a while. You know, if I'm flying, this is typically the bag that goes with me. Again, done video on flying with camera gear, and this bag is a key piece of that. But this will hold everything I need. Now, in this particular case, it's actually a little too big. There's no way I need a bag this big to take everything I've got. And it would be a case where one of the 25 liters would be awesome. I don't own a 25 liter, so this is the smallest one I've got. So we'll end up putting everything in here. I'll probably even be able to actually carry some extra stuff that I might normally put in my little smaller backpack that I carry on. But the cool thing is it's got compression straps on the side, so I can sort of keep things nice and tight and keep it nice and small. But in this particular case, I don't use a super small bag that often, and this will be nice to have a real camera bag if I go hiking in the desert or anything like that. So even though this one's a little too big for what I'm taking, it's going to be the bag that goes with me. So with that said, let's pop this open real quick and we're going to load it up just so you can sort of see what it all looks like loaded in, and then we'll wrap this video up. So this probably isn't the absolute setup I'll do, but essentially what you can see here is move this a little bit, put my lens in there, this in here like this, put the little case on DJI, shove it in here, put it in here. Like I said, I just have so much extra room with this particular setup. Got my filters, squeeze in here. Like I said, most of this will get packed up slightly different, but it's going to leave this whole flex space fairly open. I have room, slide that in there, like that. Tons of room up in here for everything in there. And that's really pretty much it. That's the pack. It's going to be nice and light compared to what I normally carry. Zip it up. Zip it up like that. And then tripod for travel. I've covered before, the tripod head I'll take off for flying. That way it doesn't stick out above the bag very much. I'll put it in that drop pocket from Shimoto, stash it in the big flex space up here at the top. And then this tripod will fit here in the water bottle pocket and get strapped in right here like this. And I'll strap it nice and tight to the bag and fly with it that way. And that's it. That's what I'm taking. I feel pretty confident with the setup. Like I said, I've used it locally or on shorter trips around here, and I know it performs well, so I'm pretty confident it'll work out. So hopefully this was helpful if you find yourself in a position where you're a landscape photographer, but you're going to travel, but you don't want to annoy everybody that's with you, but you just want to take some solid gear with you. So if you get the chance to sneak away and take some photos, you have gear that's going to help you do that. So like I said, that's the whole setup. Some of this will get repacked in here. That was sort of a quick put away, but I think you get the point. It all fits in here nice and easy. So I also think this setup is good for the landscape photographer that's just getting started or on a budget. I think it's important to remember, just because YouTubers like me might have lots of camera bodies and different lenses to choose from when we go out, you don't have to have that to get started in the hobby of landscape photography. One camera body, a lens you like, can work out really well. I think this is a pretty solid setup if you're a Nikon shooter. The 24-200 is just a great all-around lens, nice and versatile, good walk-around lens, gives you lots of options in your focal length from 24-200. I'm sure it's going to perform well for me out in the desert Southwest, just like I'm sure it'd perform well in your local area and keep you in that budget. You can swap out the Nikon Z7 II for something a little less expensive. Essentially, this is the basics of landscape photography: camera body, lens, tripod, maybe a couple filters, and you're good to go. So hopefully that helps you if you're on a budget and just trying to figure out where to get started and where to go. And for those traveling, hopefully this will help you figure out what you can safely leave at home and what you can take with you. We'll see how it works out in the desert. Anyways, if you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, mini gear reviews, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.